Jeff Reed is going to come up and share. Because as I was thinking about doing this, and Jeff always goes, "That's a good idea, Father. You do that." There you go. Okay, you're going to use that.
Good evening. I'm standing behind here so you won't see my feet shaking. I haven't given testimony in 25 years. It's something that it's very difficult for me to do, and she gave me 25 years off. I must have done something wrong because she called me back. So I'd like to begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. I'm sorry. Come, Holy Spirit. Mother Mary, stay right there. Wrap me in your mantle. Amen. You heard from Robert earlier. You heard from Father John. We were sort of pals. We were all three Anglicans, Protestant, Episcopalians. I could speak for myself. In my faith, I was raised that way. And my faith was a form of insurance. I went to church now and then. I felt good about myself. I believed in Jesus, but I didn't really have a personal relationship with him. After my father died, I headed off to college and sort of left religion behind. I started chasing material things around the world and sort of left God back in my hometown of Garland, Texas. I had a very difficult business life. I'd be up, I'd be down. And I guess you could say my journey with Our Lady began in November of 1990. And one of those times when I was down, I was pretty broke. I had a horrible job that I disliked. I flew for a living and then did odd jobs beside that. And we gathered in New Orleans at a conference, one of these sales conference things where you have to stand on your feet all day and you feel horrible. And when it was over, went and had some dinner, went back to the room to go to sleep, of course. And I had this incredible dream. Sorry. In this dream, it began, I was on a truck and it went over a cliff. And the thrust of me going over the cliff put me between the steering wheel and up on the dashboard in the fetal position. And I was just crammed in there, and I could look down and I could see the ground coming so quickly. And it was one of these dreams in full color, full sound, had the falling effect. It was so real. And I saw that ground coming so quickly. And right before impact, I cried out to God. And I said, God, take me in your arms. I am yours. I woke up. I was in New Orleans. I was in that bed. The air conditioner was on. And I was laying in a pool of sweat. Total wet. Which told me that this was not a short dream. I must have fought that battle all night. But I walked away that morning with a little bit of pride because I'd cried out to God at the last moment. And that was sort of the way I was leading my life, right on the edge. That was on a Saturday night in New Orleans. 1 week later, I was hunting with two of my friends. We ran out of supplies. We had a place down on the border, and we went over to Del Rio to get some supplies, and somebody came up with the great idea that we're going to go visit Judge Roy Bean's place, the judge west of the Pecos. So we drove, saw the museum. The sun was going down, and we had another great idea that we're going to cut across these ranch roads and go back to camp. And these roads are pretty good. They have loose rock, loose gravel. It's one of these roads where you can turn around and you can see the trail of dust a quarter mile behind you as you drive. And it was a nice evening. I was driving, and I was driving too fast. And suddenly the road dropped off into a canyon, and I would put on the brakes, and it would fishtail. And we kept going faster and faster. To the left was a solid mountain wall, and to the right was a huge abyss. And I fought that, I don't know how long it was, how many hundreds of yards, before the truck fishtailed, flipped over, and slid on the top. And we slammed into the mountainside. And if you've ever been in an accident, you know it gets really loud and a bunch of noises, and it comes to a sudden stop. And when I grabbed my senses, when they came back to me, I found myself in the dashboard, in the fetal position. I'm sorry. The same way it was in the dream 7 days before. And there are three differences. Number one, it wasn't a dream. Number two, we didn't go over the abyss. And number three, I didn't have time to cry out to God. Sort of got my attention. So I decided that I'm going to make some changes in my life. Make changes for the better. That was in November. Here comes December. Christmas, I put those changes off. New Year's, I put the changes off. And then it became January. And I guess our lady thought it was long enough. So one evening, in the middle of the week, I was driving home, and I passed by the church that I grew up in, Episcopal Church, St. David's Episcopal Church there in Garland. And I looked over to the left, and the parking lot was somewhat filled, which was really unusual in the middle of the week. And my first thought was food. There's food there. Or somebody's died, or both. So I curiously pulled in the parking lot, went into the foyer, and over to the right was a table set up, and it had a bunch of books, magazines, newspapers, it looked like Mardi Gras beads with a cross at the end of it, and two ladies smiling ear to ear. And then I thought, they're serving alcohol. I walked into the parish hall and was greeted by a very nice lady, and she welcomed me and set me down right on the front row. I didn't smell any food. Nobody was crying. Nobody had a drink in their hand. I didn't know exactly what I had gotten myself into, but I was stuck, as one can become stuck on the front row. The program was getting ready to begin, and about that time, my mother walks in the door, and they sit her right next to me. And the lady began to speak, and she wanted to tell us about the Blessed Mother. And as she began to speak about the Blessed Mother, I would look at my mother out of the corner of the eye and think, wow, That makes sense. She is our mother. And she called her several different names. Our Lady of this, Our Lady of that. And it was my first introduction to the Blessed Mother that night. The lady giving the talk had 12 children. So I assumed she was an authority on being a mother. And she mentioned that she had just come back from a place called Medjugorje, where Our Lady was appearing. I'd never heard of such a thing. I'd never heard of an apparition. I'd never heard of Fatima or Lourdes being Protestant. Really, Mary had no place, unfortunately, in the Episcopal Church. She'd come out of the closet as a figurine, put into a nativity scene just right before Christmas. And then around Epiphany, wrap her back up and put her in the closet. That's the way Mary's treated in most Protestant churches. Next, a gentleman came up to speak. He was a lawyer. He was very analytical. And he started talking about his trip there to Medjugorje and how he saw the sun spin, how his rosary turned gold, how there was such peace in this village in Yugoslavia at the time. In my life, I had always told myself, what in the world could be wrong with these people who walked the face of the earth when Jesus was here? I mean, they saw what he did. They saw his miracles. And still they walked away from him, so many. I would have not done that. If I had lived at that time, I would have followed Jesus. Easier said than done. But I thought to myself, if this is happening in my lifetime, if the Mother of God is really appearing, I have to be part of that. I really have to be part of that. So it was a nice presentation, and I walked out. I went to the table where the two ladies were smiling, and I said, what do I need? They handed me a card. They handed me those Mardi Gras beads. And they handed me a book called The Message by Wayne Weibel. I'm not much of a reader. I'm dyslexic. It's real grueling to read. But I went home, got in bed, started reading that book. I woke up the next morning and it was on my chest and I'd read halfway through it. I finished the book that day and something happened. I don't know what it was, but something happened. One of the papers I got there spoke of a conference that was a few days away in Wichita, Kansas. I would say it's a conference similar to this, a 2.5-day conference at a gathering of the faithful. And I noticed at this conference there were several people that were going to be there that I had read about in the book that impressed me so much. And one of them was Father Svetozar. And I realized I didn't have any money. I would never go to Medjugorje. And this was as close as I was going to get. So I hopped in my truck on the day of that conference, drove, 6 hours up to Wichita, which was really strange. I went alone to a religious conference, Catholic religious conference. And when I got there, there was such love. I'd truly never been embraced that way. And I think they saw a lost sheep because people were so friendly to me. They came up to me and greeted me and answered any questions that I might have. They took me around and showed me this chapel, showed me where Jesus was in adoration. I'd never seen that before. People were open about Mary. And I realized they were not Mardi Gras beans because everybody had them. There was a rosary. And at one point, a lady came up to me and she handed me her rosary. And she said, "It's a very special rosary, and I want you to have it. Our Lady told me to give it to you." I said, "No, I cannot take your rosary." I could tell it meant a lot to her. She said, "I don't have any choice. Our Lady told me to give it to you." I went to every, I didn't miss 1 minute of that conference. Every speaker. And it just penetrated my soul. I bought every tape because I wanted to review everything I'd heard over and over and over again. I wanted to become a Catholic. I wanted what they had. At one point, Father Sylvester got up to speak, and he spoke of the situation back in Yugoslavia, how the winds of war were starting to swirl, and how they had started a church project, and everybody was losing their job. The economy was poor. They didn't have the money to finish that poor church. The church was just to the north of Medjugorje. And so he said, "Anybody interested? Feels called, come to this room, and I'll tell you more about it." And I thought, oh my God, this is my ticket to Medjugorje. I can swing a hammer. I can make this work. I got there, and there was about 300 people in the room, and I realized all 300 of them couldn't swing a hammer, but they had a lot more money than I did. And Father needed money to finish the project. I was a bit disappointed because I had no money. I never raised money. I didn't know the first thing about it. But I was still joyful that I had been to that conference. Father Svet said, "If you ever find yourself in Medjugorje, look me up, and I'll take you and show you what the needs are." I drove back to Dallas that night. I think I was still in shock from what I had witnessed and the love that I had felt. And upon entering the house, I was given the news that my grandfather had died while I was at this conference. And even that felt different to me. I was a bit joyful. I knew he wasn't suffering, and I knew he was in heaven because he was a good man. 3 days later, at the funeral, my aunt approached me and gave me an envelope. He said, "Your grandfather wanted you to have a little something." I opened the envelope, and there was a $1,000 check in there. At that time, it cost $999 to go to Medjugorje. And I knew at that moment what I was supposed to do. I went to Medjugorje. That was in February. I was in Medjugorje in March. Wonderful pilgrimage. I don't have a lot of time to tell you all about it. You've heard about people speaking of just the wonders there. It's incredible. But I did find Father Svetozar. I was going to hold him to his word. And I said, "Father, I feel like I want to see what you're talking about. I want to see what the need is." So we traveled together up to the monastery there, and he showed me the project. Spent the night with the friars, which was wonderful. I even thought, wow, I could do this. And as I was leaving the next morning, he said, "You know, if it's God's will and it's supposed to be, let it be. Don't be too hard on yourself." So I went back, finished the pilgrimage, went back to America. And this calling would not leave my heart. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to help those people. I wanted to help him. Those people, when I was in Medjugorje, was a big part of my conversion because I saw how they lived their life and how simple they were, how poor they were. But at the same time, they had so much more than me. They were so generous. I told maybe 2 people about my dilemma. I didn't ask for money. I asked for advice. How in the world can I, as a Protestant, raise money for a church in Yugoslavia for a Catholic? It's a tough sell. One gentleman suggested to me that Wayne Weibel, the author of the book that I had read, and Father Svetazar were good friends, and I should just call Wayne up, and Wayne may have good advice for me. So I tried and I tried and I tried to get a hold of Wayne. It was impossible. At that time, he was very popular. He was traveling the world. But I kept knocking, calling. I was very persistent. Finally, I wore his secretary down, and she said, look, I'll arrange a meeting for you with Wayne. He's going to be in Washington, D.C., I think it was like in 10 days. And after his talk, meet him in the sacristy, and he'll make some time for you. He was speaking at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. It bills itself as the largest Catholic church in North America. Beautiful place. If you ever find yourself in Washington, which I don't advise that, but if you find yourself there, stop by, because it's absolutely beautiful. So I'm all set to go. I've got a meeting with Wayne, but money's a problem. I don't have the money to get there. That's how I was living paycheck to paycheck, week to week. So back then, that was pre-9/11, you could go to the newspaper and people would buy tickets and then they'd pawn them off because the trip got canceled. So I started praying to the Blessed Mother, asking her to provide a ticket, put a ticket in there. Went to Washington from Dallas. Days went by, didn't happen. Then I started checking for bus tickets. I was desperate. I was going to make this meeting. Then I got a call from an old friend. He said, Jeff, I need a favor. I'll pay you for it. I said, sure. What do you need? He said, I found the airplane that I've been looking for. I want you, and I'll pay you for this. I want you to get on an airliner, fly up, see the plane. If it all checks out, check all the maintenance and everything. If you think it's what I want, negotiate the deal. I'll buy it. You fly it back. Great. I want to make some money anyway. I said, where is this plane? He says, it's in Washington. I was looking for a bus ticket, and Our Lady provided me with a private plane. So I'm set. Going to go get all the answers I'm looking for, fly back in luxury. All is good. Get to Washington, go to the Basilica, go to the sacristy to meet with Wayne. And he looked surprised that I was there. Either he forgot or his secretary got me back. I'm not sure which it was. And I told him my dilemma. I said, I'm Jeff Reed, and I'm here, and I visited Father Svetazar, and I really think you can help me and give me some advice. I'm trying to raise this money to help Father Svet. And he looked at me, and he looked down at his shoes. He says, what you need to do is this. He said, pray about it. And he says, I'm in a hurry. I have to leave. Goodbye. I can't tell you how I felt. I felt really defeated. You know, what was the point? What was the point? All the airplane and it just didn't make any sense to me. And I was pretty distraught. So there they had these crypts down below. And I went down there and I just went into one of these little chapels. And I hit my knees and started praying. And I prayed to Mary and I said, Mary, what is going on here? Help me. I've tried to do this my way. And I've been trying to live my life my way the whole life, and it hadn't really worked out. I said, I surrender. That's it. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to your son. I said, all I want to do is to go to work for your son. I didn't know what that meant. I said, if it meant sweeping floors somewhere, and there's nothing wrong with sweeping floors. If that's what you want me to do, that's what I will do. Just put me to work for your son. And as clear as glass, I heard, I already have. It was real. It was her. I flew back home. And a few days later, I went to my mailbox. And there was a large check in there. Remember, I haven't asked anybody for any money. I called the individual who had written the check and I said, there's too many zeros on this check. You must have made a mistake. And this individual said, no. I want to thank you for telling me about Medjugorje. It came at a perfect time in my life. And he said, this is a little something to get you started. I'm going to use a bad word here. I said, started hell. I'm finished. This monkey's off my back. I'm going to give the money to the good Father, and I'm out of this fundraising business. Little did I know. And then he goes, Jeff, if Medjugorje can change you, it can change anybody. Now that wasn't a compliment to me. That was a compliment to Our Lady. I need to wrap up here. They're waving at me, and I don't want to, I'm being followed by Jesus, so I don't want to take up too much of his time. But needless to say, that was the seed money of a foundation that Our Lady began. She allowed me to manage it. We were able, with the help of Father Svetozar and Father John Anthony, to raise money and help out during the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And it was such a blessing because the things that were happening through the foundation and the money that was being raised and the millions of dollars worth of aid that was being delivered, it wasn't from me. I knew that. I was too stupid to do. I had no experience in that. It was so neat to sit back, have a front row seat, watch the hand of God working for so many years. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. It was all being driven by Our Lady. I have to conclude. I have to conclude by saying, if you ever have a chance, get a chance to come to Medjugorje, do it. It's a special place. I married a Croatian woman. I moved over there 21 years ago, raised my family there. I couldn't be happier. I guess I could say I'm one of the lucky ones who went and stayed. If you ever come, look us up. We've got an extra bed, it's yours. Thank you.